everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We have some limited time, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Of course, we'll have more folks joining. My name's Jacqueline Hawkins. I am the incoming director of the Curtis Center for Health Equity. Each semester, we have a health equity seminar where we bring in a faculty affiliate to discuss their work related to health equity. It is our pleasure today to have Dr. James Ellis with us, who is an assistant professor in the School of Social Work. Dr. Ellis graduated with an MSW from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor from the School of Social Work and a PhD from the University of Michigan School of Education in the Center for the Study of Higher and Post-Secondary Education. Dr. James Ellis's research investigates the relationships between the education pipeline experiences and racial, ethnic, and low-income student pathways to college enrollment and degree completion. His scholarship examines the nexus between college readiness, program participation, developmental approaches to college readiness, social support from peers and adults, and racism and discrimination in education settings. Dr. Ellis was a lead researcher investigator with the Finish Line Project, a U.S. Department of Education First in the World grant. This research examined first-generation college student persistence, academic outcomes, and participation in university retention programs at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. His future program of research includes examining the intersectionality of racial and socioeconomic identity and its influence on college persistence among Black and Latinx male undergraduate students. So before I give the floor to Dr. Ellis, I want to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. So if you registered to receive continuing education credits for this webinar, please make sure your Zoom name matches your registration name. Also, please make sure you stay on for the whole session and answer all of the poll questions. If there's a glitch with the polls, please add your answer to the chat and we will take record of it. So without further ado, the title of today's presentation is a microaffirmation approach toward understanding mental health and well-being among Black male college students. Dr. Ellis?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited to be here to share my work, and I really appreciate the warm introduction, Dr. Hawkins. Thank you so much. Let's see here. Just gonna get myself situated here. All right. As Dr. Hawkins mentioned, today our topic focuses on a microaffirmation approach towards understanding mental health and well-being of Black male college students. Our agenda today is illustrated here on the slide, and what we'll do is I'll start with the discussion around the background and significance of depression. Then we'll transition into a discussion around racial discrimination and depression. And then I'll introduce microaffirmations and discuss its background and significance and its potential to reduce depression. I'll then share a recent study that me and my team conducted with regards to examining effects of microaffirmations on reducing depression. And then we'll conclude today's talk by discussing implications for both research and practice. So what is depression? Depression is a common but serious mood disorder that causes severe symptoms that affect how a person feels, thinks, and handles daily activities. This particular definition is reflective of major depressive disorder, and this particular definition will be the focus of this presentation, even though that there are other types of depressive disorders that exist and one can experience. So this actually leads to our first poll question. In March of 2023, what percentage of US adults reported having depression at some point during their lifetime? So if you answered 29%, that is the correct answer. So this line graph displays results from a recent Gallup Pulse survey study conducted in February of 2023 with 5,000 adults aged 18 or older living in all 50 states, US states. As part of the Gallup National Health and Wellbeing Index, the graph highlights that lifetime and current depression rates are at an all-time high among US adults. So now we have a second question for you to answer. In March of 2023, what percentage of Black adults in the US reported having depression at some point during their lifetime? Yeah. So if you answered 34%, that is the correct answer. And in the same Gallup poll, this survey study that I previously referenced, lifetime depression diagnosis rates among Black adults are rising at about twice the rate of white adults. Moreover, young adults are experiencing the great increases in life depression diagnosis than any other age group since 2017. The trends reported in the Gallup National Health and Wellbeing Index study is consistent with other national surveys showing that U.S. Black adults aged 18 to 25 are more likely to report having a major depressive episode than Black adults aged 26 to 49 and even 50 years age or older. Moreover, national trend data suggests that since 2018, young Black males are more likely to experience a major depressive disorder than older Black male adults. So when thinking about these trends and research, studies suggest that stressful life events such as health, financial, employment, family, neighborhood problems such as crime and policing are associated with depression among Black adults. These factors or problems reflect social determinants of depression that vary by race, ethnicity, gender, social economic status, and poverty. Another stressful life event that is the focus of this study is racial discrimination and its contribution to Black young adults experiencing depression. So everyday discrimination as stressful life events, they are interpersonal manifestations of racism or a society system of dominance, power, and privilege that is often based on racial group designation. These interpersonal manifestations of racism are also understood as micro and macroaggressions. Microaggressions, which some of you in this webinar might be familiar with, are manifestations of racism that is often expressed through interpersonal encounters and environmental cues that demean, insult, and minimize the identities, backgrounds, and lived experiences of individuals from a marginalized group. Macroaggressions are described in the literature as systematic and institutional forms of racism that is manifested in the philosophy, programs, policies, and practices within key institutions such as government agencies, legal judicial systems, healthcare organizations, and of my interest is around educational institutions. So now we are going to ask a third poll question. In 2016, what percentage of Black adults who attended college in the United States reported experiencing racial discrimination? Yes, yes, 81%. So if you answered 81%, that is the correct answer. And so, according to a 2016 Pew Research Center survey, adults who attended college at some point in their life were more likely to report experiencing racial discrimination than those who did not attend college. And so now we are to our fourth poll question. In 2022, what percentage of Black college students at schools with low racial diversity reported feeling discriminated against? Yes, yes, 31%. 31%. And and so looking at this particular slide, this is analysis from the 2022 from a 2022 Gallup and Lumina Foundation report that that conducted a study looking at the trade-offs and challenges facing Black students in higher education. This report found that Black students are more likely to feel discriminated against at institutions with least racially diverse student bodies. Moreover, Black students in least diverse student bodies were more likely to say that they feel disrespected and physically or psychologically unsafe. So when thinking about these trends, they suggest that racial microaggressions shape students' experiences in schools, colleges, and university. And the research literature in this area suggests that microaffirmations that come in the form of questionings one's intellect, competence, and merit, the outward expression of racial slurs and jokes, the reinforcement of stereotypes, particularly racially based stereotypes, and minimization of the impact that of racism and discrimination is having on the lived experiences of not only students themselves, but the communities for which they are a part of. And that these particular experiences have negative consequences for students from historically marginalized groups during their college experience, especially in the realm of their mental health. Prior studies indicate, particularly studies that are looking at the relationship between microaggressions and depression, have found that when one experiences microaggressions is positively correlated with depression. This relationship has been found to be explained by past negative racial encounters that are often intermingled with current experiences of microaggressions on campuses with low levels of racial diversity. Alcohol consumption and adoption of masculine norms are also discussed in the literature as unique coping responses that some Black male college students engage in to process racial microaggressions, and are important intervening factors to consider in the microaggression depression relationship, especially during their first or second year on campus. Recent research is finding that interacting with friends and engaging in physical activity are one of many masculine norms that Black male college students are engaging in, and that these are informed by coping strategies for which they engage in to manage stress produced by their experience with racial microaggressions. And so when thinking about the connection between microaggressions and depression, Research is emerging and is around this around the idea of social support as a key factor in helping Black men manage depressive symptoms as a result, again, of experiencing racial microaggressions. Social support are defined in the literature a lot of different ways from what I found, but the definition that I'm being informed by is everyday behaviors that, whether directly or indirectly, communicate to an individual that she or he is valued and cared for by others. Support of others can include having friends, family, or other people that provide interpersonal communication and interaction, love and understanding, caring and concern, financial assistance, and respect and acceptance during times of need or crisis. Research illustrates that trusting social connections, particularly family members, peers, or mentors, can potentially mitigate dangers associated with experiencing microaggressions by providing Black men space to directly name depression as a challenge in their lives, as well as seek professional counseling, rely on active listening skills to decipher coded language and expressions about the discriminatory experiences of others as well as themselves. Ethnically based social connections, or connecting or connections with others that through shared racial ethnic identity and experiences, can also reduce the prevalence of depressive symptoms for Black male college students, because they facilitate supportive environments that facilitate the existence that validate, excuse me, the existence of racial microaggressions in their lives. And so when thinking about context in which Black male college students process microaggression, there's a body of literature that talks about counter spaces as spaces where Black males can process their experience with racial microaggressions that validates their experience or reality. These particular counter spaces provide a non-judgmental atmosphere for students to develop networks and meaningful relationships with peers and faculty, where experiences and struggles with microaggressions are met with mutual understanding of their presence and effect on their daily lives. And these particular experiences within counter spaces provide students with instrumental knowledge and emotional support to navigate their college experience, develop meaningful connections to their everyday lived experiences and what they're learning in the classroom. Also an opportunity to network or connect with professionals where those professionals are engaging in work around equity, marginalization of marginalization, as well as intersectionality. And what happens in these counter spaces, as described in the literature, these particular spaces establish counter narratives that actively resist messages of inferiority that is inherent in racial or other forms of microaggressions when experienced. And so when thinking about these areas, this is where microaffirmations as a body, as a phenomenon and body of research, kind of fits into the experiences of Black male college students and also other marginalized groups on college campuses. And so when thinking about what microaffirmations are, they attempt to identify encounters, or it attempts to identify encounters that affirm, validate, and support the experiences, identities of racially and socioeconomically marginalized groups. Microaffirmations has theoretical foundations in critical race theory that describe subtle verbal or non-verbal strategies that people of color and persons from other marginalized groups engage in to affirm each other's value, integrity, and humanity. But there's also a conceptualization of microaffirmations that focus on the verbal communications and interactions that one has that fosters inclusion, comfort, support, and listening. And that these particular this idea of microaffirmations are um, considered as individualized expressions of existing efforts that can either happen in formal counter spaces or through daily interactions that acknowledges, addresses, or even combats um, racism that are often perpetuated in institution as a result of microaggressions being present in their everyday lives. So similar to microaggressions, existing empirical research in this area aims to identify the different types of microaffirmation students can experience on campus. And these studies describe, how populations such as first-generation college students and racially minoritized students experience can experience enhanced academic self-concept, sense of belonging, and even foster resilience when they particularly receive messages either overtly or covertly from either a faculty member, a peer, a staff member on campus that recognize is their social identity and their academic accomplishments. As well, these particular connections are also meaningful for which students in these studies gained access to knowledge and resources to help them navigate stress related to microaggressions. There are also studies that show that when faculty members, staff, or peers treat students without reference to cultural characteristics or are encouraging of student strengths and are cognizant of their own personal identity and lived experiences that they identified with, of their social group that they identify with, that students often feel that microaffirmations are present and promote feelings of empowerment, identity, academic self-efficacy, and persistence on campus. And so when thinking about the existing knowledge around microaffirmations, a lot of the existing information out there shows that microaffirmations can promote positive psychosocial outcomes as listed here on the slide. And a lot of these studies often have had populations or samples that are with students of first generation college student statuses, which is an indicator. It's a multidimensional, I think, concept that looks at SES and race and other identities. And then also the existing research have predominantly Black, Latinx, and white female samples as well. And so when kind of looking at the state of the literature and what's out there, one question that arose for myself and is to what extent do experiencing microaffirmations as a young adult, particularly in a college setting, how does that to what extent does it promote mental health and well-being, and by promoting health and well-being, how does microaffirmations potentially reduce depressive symptoms if they are present in the lives of Black male college students? And so this particular, I guess, gap in the literature is what prompted me to engage in another study that investigated the degree to which Black male college students' exposure to microaffirmations and microaggressions affect depression. Another purpose of this study was to determine if these effects varied by key academic and demographic factors, such as enrollment in other institutions, such as historically Black colleges, university, first generation college student status, whether Black men or whether students identified as multiracial or other racial identities, as well as transfer status. And so the key question in this study was what is the relationship between microaggressions and microaffirmations and depression among Black college men? So this study, it was a national survey panel study, and it was conducted in collaboration with a Qualtrics experience management team to collect survey data from a national panel of Black male college students in the United States. In this design, I consulted with the team, the Qualtrics team, to provide sampling parameters for data collection. Students who identified as Black and male were the primary sampling parameters that was discussed in developing the survey panel, guided by the research questions and the scope of the study. Another parameter in developing the survey panel was enrollment in an AACU, or Association of American College and University higher education institution. The AACU is a member of 1,000 institutions whose purpose is to advance the vitality and demographic purposes of undergraduate liberal education and be a catalyst for innovations that improve the educational success for all students. More than 1/3 of the ACCU member institutions are historically Black colleges, universities. Thus, survey respondent enrollment was crucial. Was a crucial study parameter to develop a nationally representative sample of Black male undergraduate students enrolled in colleges and universities in the United States. And so after structuring the survey panels, Qualtrics then recruited participants from various sources, such as targeted email lists, gaming sites, consumer loyalty web portals, and even social media. These consumer-based panel members' names, addresses, and dates of birth were collected and verified by a third party through various quality control measures, such as LinkedIn matching, phone calls to participants' place of business if they were employed, verify, and so forth. And these quality checks were verified prior to the finalization of the study's survey panel. Then once panel members were verified, then members were sent an email invitation with a hyperlink to the study survey and were presented with study incentive information as well as the study consent form. So this slide displays the sampling characteristics of those who completed the survey. Most participants who completed the survey reported being between the ages of 18 and 24, a cisgender male, a first-generation college student, a non-transfer student, and were enrolled either as a first-year or second-year student on a campus. Participants also reported not currently attending an HBCU and not having multiple racial identities. And so these are some of the key survey measures that were included in the survey. Items reflecting each of these measures were adapted to align with the study population scope and research questions. We performed reliability analysis of these items for which they were adapted, and the results of that analysis indicated that our adapted measures did produce strong reliability or internal consistency for this survey panel. When considering our data analysis approach, structural equation modeling was the main analysis technique that was employed to answer our, the study's questions, as well as hypotheses. In our factor analysis, results indicated that when that the Gotland scale provided a better model fit as a two-factor solution of mood and functioning, and that the PHQ-9 would provided a better model fit for a single factor solution. Additionally, we performed a moderation analysis or a two-group analysis option in an M+, and that the variables included in the models were summated to create composite scores reflecting dimensions of our key survey measures, and that to handle any data that was missing, we performed full maximum likelihood estimation to handle missing data. So now I'm going to share just some preliminary results from this study. And so when considering our hypothesis, so our first and second hypothesis in this study was that, that study participants who frequently experience microaffirmations will be associated with decreased depressive symptoms, and similarly that study participants who frequently experience racial microaggressions will be associated with an increased depressive symptoms. And it's essentially what we found. We found a negative relationship between microaffirmations experienced and depression symptoms as measured by the PHQ-9, which suggests that as exposure to microaffirmations encounters increased depressive symptoms decrease for our study participants. And aligned with the existing research that I just described, we also found a positive relationships between microaggressions and our depression outcomes, suggesting that as exposure to microaggression encounters increased, depressive symptoms also increased for study participants. So what this figure shows is that our hypothesis, first and second hypothesis, was confirmed. And so, I'm really excited about this particular finding, to suggest that, microaffirmations, if you experience them, that it could potentially have a positive effect on your mental health and well-being if you're a Black male student on a college campus. And so additional results from this study I want to share. So we also found that there was no relationship between microaffirmation experience and depressive symptoms among first-generation college students. And you can see that there is no line in the figure going from microaffirmations and to our outcomes, depressive outcomes. We also found a relationship between microaggressions and depression symptoms among first-generation college students. So among non-first generation college students, there was a negative relationship between microaffirmations experienced and depressive symptoms. And again, a positive relationship was found between microaggressions and depressive symptoms among first generation college students. But the relationship between microaggression and depressive symptoms was stronger for first generation college students. when looking at HBCU enrollment, we found that there was no relationship between microaffirmations experience and depressive symptoms among Black male college students enrolled at a HBCU. And again, that there was a positive relationship between microaggressions and depression symptoms among Black male college students enrolled at an HBCU. And then finally, we found that among Black males not enrolled at an HBCU, that there was a negative relationship found between microaffirmation experienced and depression. And that, again, consistent across all our results, that that positive relationship between microaggressions and depression among Black male college students not enrolled at an HBCU, but the relationship between microaggressions and depression was stronger for participants enrolled at an HBCU. So now, when thinking about the research and social work practice implications of our topic for today, as well as the results of this study, so there are many research implications to consider. This is an initial exploratory study, so there are a lot of opportunities to move forward in a lot of different directions as it relates to microaffirmations and depression. But one implication that I will highlight at the moment is the continued importance of conducting research studies with intersectionality in mind. Our findings, I think, reaffirms Kimberly Crenshaw's concept of intersectionality, which describes the ways in which systems of inequality based on gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, class, and other forms of discrimination intersect to create unique dynamics and experiences and effects on people of those with those identities. In this study, so we see that race and socioeconomic status are key intersections, I think, to consider when trying to understand the role microaffirmations play in reducing depression for Black male college students. Another point of emphasis is that in this study, we see that microaffirmations are more effective in reducing depression for Black male students enrolled in non-HBCU campus environment or environments with historically white or populations, or majorities historically white populations, or other minority serving institutions compared to HBCUs. And I think another point of emphasis is that when thinking about microaffirmations and and its direction at many aspects of one's identity, I think is key to understanding their effect in reducing depression. And for example, in our study, non-first generation college students, participants, microaffirmations that were centered on racial identity were effective in reducing depression. So I'm curious, if I were to do another study where, I included items that were more directed at, Black males who primarily identified as a first generation college student, would I see similar results or different results? So even though this study found that microaffirmations can indeed reduce depressive symptoms for Black male college students, it's unclear which aspect of the college experience contribute to Black males experiencing microaffirmations and its promotion of their well-being, positive well-being. So I think as I think about moving forward in this work, I think future mixed method and longitudinal studies are needed to really ascertain which experiential contexts do microaffirmations promote positive well-being, as well as reduce depression symptoms. So for instance, do counter spaces such as, institutionally sponsored Black male initiatives and programs that have, proliferated across many colleges and universities in our country, or even student affinity group organizations, provide a space for microaffirmations to occur that in turn reduce depressive symptoms? Or do institutionally sponsored programs or even outreach initiatives that explicitly focus on student mental health and well-being provide environments for microaffirmations to occur that in turn reduce depression symptoms? So I think, these are one of many critical questions I think needs to be considered when thinking about, future research directions on this particular topic. And so when thinking about, this work and its implications for practice, um, I'm excited because, I think this study and microaffirmations as a framework, I think has profound implications for, social work practitioners working on college campuses, in academic advising, counseling, student affairs, or even other capacities on campus. And I think this the findings from my study, I think, can begin to help campuses and practitioners engage in strategies and practices that foster relationships, genuine relationships with Black male college students, and potentially promote their well-being on campus. And I think particularly engaging in, practices may be helpful for social work practitioners with, individually with students who might have experienced microaggressions during their college experience. And so when I think about, some practices that I think social workers can engage in, I think include these elements, which I think um, the social work profession, I think, and training prepares us to do these things well. And so when thinking about practicing active listening, it's revolving around focusing on the student, engaging in them, repeating what the student says to make sure that you understand, that you're asking follow-up questions that show how your interest and, in the students and their lives, that can help the student draw their own conclusions about what they are experiencing and the supports that they may receive. When I think about recognizing it, and validate every student experiences, this means that, you're making, clear to the student that you understand the challenge that they're experiencing, and that you're there to help them to consider productive ways of dealing, right, or navigating those challenges. And so that can include offering appropriate verbal, written, or even just your body language can demonstrate that you're interested and care about what the student is experiencing and is sharing with you if they choose to share. Affirming student feelings, validating feelings while steering students towards developing productive perspectives about their experience. This can include, identifying resources and options that are available, especially if a student is feeling dissatisfied, frustrated, or disappointed in their college experience, excuse me. And so by affirming feelings, you're acknowledging that the challenge is present in their experiences, and that it's an opportunity for growth, healing, and empowerment. And then when I think about helping students optimally process academic and social experiences, it's asking students questions that will help them reflect on their academic and social experience, and explore their thinking and decisions, their feelings, reactions, and potential options during their college experience. And so these questions can, I think, help students process their academic and social experiences in a way that will help them productively plan for the future and continue to grow as students. And I think this last implication, which I think connects well to what we, discussed today, um, is, around, suggesting healthy student perspectives to navigate microaggressions. And, this involves helping students identify and even naming or confronting, insulting comments or behaviors that were targeted at their racial or other social identity. This, also includes working with students to identify persons, resources, or entities for advocacy or support, and that helping students, I think, engaging in these practices will help students provide a positive perspective in their response to microaggressions that they may experience, and as well as social workers working with them to maybe do some cognitive reframing for how to address their the problem um, or challenges that they're having. And I think finding ways to helping students take care of themselves, I think is also important, consider when I think about microaffirmations, especially, as we discussed earlier in the presentation around, this, how to mitigate the tension or stress that is often associated when, when someone experiences a microaggression. And so now we arrive to our final poll question of the day. So what topics were covered in today's seminar? Yes, all of the above. This is essentially what we covered. You know, what was covered, today during my time with you all. And so before I, end the formal presentation, um, I just have to make sure I provide some acknowledgement. So couldn't do this work on my own. I want to give kudos to my the study team who helped conduct the study. That includes Leon Mason and Jenny Jester, who was the data analyst and is part of the School of Social Work's Treatment Innovation and Dissemination Group. Um, Dr. Daphne Watkins was, also a key collaborator, particularly at the early stages of this work, and so her perspective, was greatly valued in helping me, think about the study and framing the survey. And also Raylene Welling and Kristen Whalen, they were the Qualtrics management team that I worked with to conduct this national panel survey. And then I appreciate and the Curtis Center and the School of Social Work for giving me the time and the resources and support to conduct this work and continue to engage in this work. So, and I apologize if I might have missed anyone who's been a part of this work and is on our call today. So, I thank you for your time today, and I'm looking forward to fielding any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. It was an amazing presentation. And we're so happy to have you as our speaker this semester. Now I'm going to open the table for questions. We've got about 8 minutes left. And you can enter your question in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen for the webinar. We would love for folks to, to take advantage of this opportunity to ask Dr. Ellis anything about the presentation. And I'll get the ball rolling. Dr. Ellis, this is amazing work. I have a couple of questions, but I'll start with a general question, which is, how did you get interested in this line of research?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say part of it is it's twofold. So, my prior work, my prior research that I conducted back in 2019, really gave me a lot of insight into the power that when students are able to name an encounter that really appreciates who they are and what they experience what they experience, positive or negative, on campus, that it can have an effect on a variety of psychosocial outcomes that ultimately get influenced, that influences one's well-being. Um, and so I was noticing that in that work. But I also had some students in that qualitative work kind of mention, like, it's not all roses, and students, sharing how, especially when they first generation college students experience, you know, microaggressions, that it made them feel, worthless. It made them feel like they didn't matter. And I think when we think about depression, as we started off in our talk today, those affect your mood. It affects your self concept, your emotions. And it can really have an impact on how you choose to engage and participate in the higher education experience. So I saw that, and then I think it's also connected to my own experience, and anecdotally as well. Just kind of seeing that through the research process that I've conducted, and then kind of reflecting on that, in my own experience now as an adult, who's well beyond his undergraduate years, but still remembering those moments where I felt really down, but where there was, moments where I was feeling down, there were moments where, you know, that I had experiences and encounters that really helped me kind of overcome, emotions, that often made me feel, that I was, I wasn't valued, or my perspective didn't matter. So I think the combinations of those two, and then just being involved with the entities that I mentioned in my acknowledgement, kind of helped me, like, maybe put a pin on it, like, oh yeah, maybe we should be studying mental health and well-being and depression. So that's kind of how I thought about this work, that I shared today. I don't know if that helps.
Oh, it absolutely does. It being influenced by your own personal experience, and the observations you've made, that absolutely uh, makes complete sense. So I want to. We have time for probably a couple more questions.
Sure, sure.
Rob Palermo asks, do you see any significant changes in experiences or outcomes with adult learners versus traditional age college students? Or is that something that you've looked at or plan to look at?
I think that's something I plan to look at. Right now, and I think this kind of that's a great question, because it's something that, when I go back to the results, and I didn't talk about this in my former presentation, but when it comes to how does one interpret whether an encounter they experience is affirmational or it's patronizing, right? And you'll see, if you were looking closely at each figure, that age, right? So the age of students was consistently, positively correlated with microaffirmations, right? The arrow going from age to microaffirmation. So that, for me, I'm mindful of that, and I think, one's kind of maturation or development and wisdom or experiences throughout the life course, I think does matter, when thinking about, how do they interpret the type of encounters or experiences that they have. And I think there is room to introduce this type of work to the collegiate experiences of non-traditional students or older adults. And I think that has profound, even practice implications for, college campuses that seek to provide, mental health services and counseling to those populations. So absolutely, I think there's significant differences there.
Thank you. And that's actually a great segue into our last question, which is you talked a little bit about this, but just really quickly, a few of our questions relate to how you might integrate microaffirmations into or create or promote affirming spaces on college campuses. Like, sort of, what are your preliminary ideas in the last minute?
Yeah. So I, I so what's consistent in the research that I am involved in and that I know of so far is that first and second year seems to be a critical moment, in the college experience for students, whether you're a first gen student, your gender, gender identity, females, cisgender or non-binary, or now, as Black male students, right? So, I'm currently in the preliminary process of, maybe developing some type of not intervention per se, but frameworks or practice models for transition programs, right? There's a lot of transition programs that focus on the first year or second year experiences on college campuses to, either not reframe, but to incorporate this microaffirmation concept and approach to how they support, students transition into colleges, universities on campus. So that's kind of the area where I'm thinking about in terms of future kind of directions that merges the research and practice in this area.
Absolutely. And we are very much, you've got clinicians here who work in college settings and other folks who are very much interested in this work. So we want to, and it's incredibly impactful and important. We want to thank you again, Dr. Ellis, for this amazing presentation. And with that, we will conclude. Everyone have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you, everybody.